I'd like to introduce Marla Dean.
I was digging through a box of one of my many writings, and I found this short story that I had written many years ago. I don't know why I wrote it. It is total fiction. It's nothing to do with anybody I know. You know, it's not a memoir, anything like this. But when I reread it, it really touched me again, and I decided to rework it and fix it, and here it is. The dog. I was 6 when I came home from school and she was gone. I sat in the empty kitchen until it got dark and remember rushing to the front door when I heard it open, but it was my dad. He didn't say much, just told me to get packed. We were moving. When I asked him where my mother was, he looked at me hard and warned me to never speak of her again. I understood his threat and kept my tears for my pillow. I knew my mom would come for me. At first I told myself she was having trouble finding us because we moved around so much. Each day my heart would beat a little faster as I entered whatever house we were living in. I imagined her smiling at me and her smell, a whiff of cigarettes and roses. But gradually, I forgot what she even looked like. I'm not sure when I stopped expecting her to be waiting for me after school, but things were quieter after she left. My daddy had a real mean temper, and after a few beers, it was just best to stay out of his way. I guess she didn't do that too well. I remember the screams and horrible arguments and hiding between my mattress and box springs, hoping they'd forget about me. She made my sandwiches for lunch every morning, as if the battles of the night before had never happened. Each day she told me she was putting a little love into them just for me. I didn't blame her for making a run for it, but I wish she'd said goodbye. The summer of my 10th year, my daddy moved us into a rent house called a fixer-upper. It wasn't that old and looked like most of the places we had lived, an unloved house where no one planned to stay too long. The backyard was empty, weeds, no trees, and one of those small aluminum storage sheds shoved right up against the neighbor's chain link fence. Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. It had already been a rough month since we arrived in this place. The beatings were pretty regular, and he wasn't giving me a chance to run either. My dad got a job at a coffee packaging joint, a plant. His shift didn't start until late afternoon, and he liked to sleep all morning. He'd wake me up when he got home from work around 4 a.m., yank me out of bed and start in on me about something. I guess maybe he was lonely too, and our only contact was through his anger. I discovered how quiet I could be that summer. But even when you are very careful, you can sometimes slip up. One morning I was fixing a bowl of cereal and dropped it. It landed on the floor with a loud crash and broke into a million pieces. I froze, but didn't have to wait long before hearing yells and curses from his room. I knew what was coming and got out the back door. I needed to become invisible fast. He was crashing around the kitchen, and I heard him scream in pain. He must have stepped on the broken glass. Just as I hooked my fingers into the metal of the neighbor's fence and started to climb, I noticed a small space between the fence and the storage shed. I was skinny, even for a 10-year-old, and managed to squeeze into that tiny place. My back pressed up against the metal shed, and I slid down, wrapping my arms around my knees, trying to make myself as small as possible. I closed my eyes and prayed to simply disappear. I knew he'd kill me if he found me. The back door slammed open and bounced against the side of the house with a crack. He was calling my name, cursing and yelling to the whole neighborhood what he was going to do when he caught me. I listened, waited, and then it got quiet. He started muttering something as he slammed back into the house. I began to breathe again and opened my eyes. The dog was sitting right in front of me on the other side of the fence. I don't think he was any particular kind of dog. He was big and mostly black with long hair and soft brown eyes. It was already hot and he was panting, showing me all of his teeth. I wasn't scared of him, but I wasn't stupid either. I held myself real still, watching him watch me. He must have made some kind of decision because he stuck his nose through the fence and licked one of my knees. The minutes passed slowly. I felt the metal digging into my legs and my back ached, but I wasn't going anywhere until late afternoon. I reached out and touched him. He pressed his entire body against the fence, hungry for contact, and I stuck my fingers through the wire and scratched. I didn't know why I began talking, but I told him everything about my dad and my life. The words poured out of me. We were both alone, sad, and in want of something. The dog listened intently and seemed to understand my blubbering in need of him. I remained hidden throughout the day, and the dog stayed with me. It was close to 5 when I heard the truck start up. Soon after, the back door of the neighbor's house opened, and an arm placed a bowl of dog food on the cement steps. I knew what waited for me when my father got home, but neither of us moved. I rubbed the dog's ears and finally told him softly I would be back. I had found a friend. My dad made himself heard around 4 in the morning. I could smell the beer on his breath before he reached the bed. This time, no amount of pleading or apologies had any effect, and he beat me until his arm grew tired. Exhausted, he finally went to bed, and I lay in my sweaty sheets, bruised and runny-faced until I heard his snores. Sleep was done for me. I filled a large glass with water, grabbed 2 hot dogs for my friend, and quickly crept out into the darkness. I was soundless. The moon had settled on the horizon, and the dead grass crunched under my feet as I crept into my hiding place. The dog was waiting. He was as silent as I. From that day on, neither of us were lonely. I never saw another person with a dog or heard anyone speak to him. Every day at 5, a hand would emerge to give him water and food, but I never saw the whole neighbor. My father and I greeted in passing, and our early morning interactions were sporadic. The dog was my secret and escape. For the next 2 months, our pattern was set. And maybe for the first time since my mom left, I was happy. I'd come out early and talk to him about my dreams and anger. It didn't matter how hot it got, or even if it rained. He never tired of listening. I'd leave him in the afternoon, prepare a sandwich for my dad, and retreat to my room until I heard the truck leaving. Then I was back out with the dog until I went to bed each night. I could hear him outside barking and whining if my dad was after me. If I cried or screamed, the dog responded, and it comforted me, knowing something cared about what was happening. I told the dog everything. One Thursday, my dad finished off a 6-pack before work. He grabbed my arm so hard I thought he was going to pull it off. He got real close to my face and told me how sick he was of me moping around. I didn't know what to say, but knew he was waiting for something. I asked him if he wanted a sandwich, and he slapped me so hard my ear was ringing. No, I don't want a goddamn sandwich. I want a new life. I want a do-over. I want... His screaming voice turned to a kind of moan. I watched him from the floor as he rocked, weeping, and pounded the walls. I understood his pain and wished with all my heart I wasn't part of it. He left me cringing in the corner and stormed out of the house. As I listened to the truck speed away, I hoped he would never come back. And the other side of me was terrified that he wouldn't. What would I do? Where would I go? I went out to talk it over with the dog. I felt really bad. My arm hurt and my face stung from the slap. The dog listened and I pushed my face against the fence in his fur. I loved the dog more than I had ever loved anything. I held his head best I could through the fence, talking to him close, eye to eye. I told him I didn't think I could take it anymore, and I knew he understood. After an hour or so, I decided we needed a snack and went into the house for a couple slices of cheese. I didn't know my dad had returned or notice him watching me through the kitchen window as I ran back to the shed. I found out later he was fired for being drunk on the job and had come home early. I was feeding the dog cheese when I heard the back door slam. Every part of me shifted into alert, and I knew the dog could feel my fear. He began to tremble with me. "Billy, get your ass over here!" His voice broke the silence. I heard the pop of the beer can, and his voice was rising now. "Did you hear me? God damn it, I said get your ass over here. I want to talk to you about feeding good food I paid for to a stupid dog." I wasn't invisible anymore. He was coming down the cement steps and crossing the yard on the dry grass. Before I could breathe, he yanked me out of my hiding place. "God damn it, you little son of a bitch. When I call you, I expect you to come." I didn't say a word as he shook me hard and dragged me back to the house. I tried to get away and knocked the beer out of his hand by mistake. He slapped me across the face and I fell to the ground, seeing stars. I heard the dog growl, but I didn't see him jump the fence. I don't think my daddy saw him either until it was too late. He was reaching down to grab me when the dog hit him and knocked him flat into the dirt and dried grass. He started screaming as the dog tore into him. He was terrified, and his screams were not like anything I had ever heard. The yard was filled with snarls and shrieks. All I could see was teeth, dust, and black fur swirling over my dad like a little tornado. His neck and face were bitten up, and he was bleeding badly when he started crawling for the house. The dog took a piece of his arm, and I don't know how, but my dad reached up to turn the doorknob. The hand that had hit me so many times was grabbed by the dog. My daddy got the door open, but not before he almost lost 3 fingers to my friend. He was crying and raving in the house when the dog came over and licked my face. I hugged him hard and was still holding him when I heard the sirens coming down the street. The beatings stopped the day the dog jumped the fence. It was a week before my 11th birthday. My daddy needed over 100 stitches and nearly lost the fingers on his right hand, but got some cash for the injury and let it go. He's always looking over his shoulder now, afraid of what he might see coming after him from the corner of his eye. He still gets mad, yells, and crashes about, but he has never raised his hand against me since that day. We moved soon after into a trailer a few towns over, and I don't know what happened to my friend. I never knew his name, but I haven't forgotten him, and neither has my father. He still jumps every time he hears a dog bark. One day, I'll go back, maybe when I get a bike. It can't be that far, and I know the dog will be waiting for me.